Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Really lovely to be here. Thanks very much to Dean Kanchan for this lovely introduction. Thanks so much to the Georgetown Public Policy Editorial Board for inviting me here tonight. Let us embark on a journey around the world to share stories on your theme of rethinking governance. And let us begin our journey with Election Day in Afghanistan. So it was 11 in the morning on October 20th last year when a polling station in Kabul got bombed. The ambulances came and took away the dead and the wounded. But amazingly, that very day, Afghans, many poor and destitute, returned to the same polling station, insisted on reopening the voting, and waited in long lines, including the disabled, to cast their vote. It's truly moving to see the depth of passions for citizens to exercise their precious and inalienable democratic right to elect a government that truly serves their interests. You know, the promise of democracy has been defined by the ballot box, yet too often that promise has not translated into reality in people's daily lives. Today, even though citizens in a majority of countries are electing their leaders through formal electoral processes, citizen trust in their elected government has plummeted to an all-time low, according to the Edelman Barometer. In far too many countries, citizens perceive their governments to be disconnected and unresponsive to their needs, or corrupt and captured by special interests. So elections alone have not proven sufficient in delivering on the aspirations of the people. We need to look beyond the ballot box to deliver on the promise of the ballot box. And we need to look beyond the ballot box to also tackle new threats to democracy, which today are not coming from stolen elections or military coups as in the past. The challenge today is not in the conduct of elections per se, but it is in the accompanying democratic institutions that make elections meaningful. So for instance, in over 100 countries, citizens' basic ability to freely speak, associate, assemble, and therefore to participate in democracy is itself under attack. From Hungary to Tanzania to Turkey, Russia, and beyond, elected leaders, including in more established democracies, are using strongman tactics to attack the media, civil society, oversight institutions that can help ensure that the government acts in the public interest. And we are seeing new digital threats to democracy through the spread of disinformation to manipulate public opinion. These attacks on democratic governance are taking place between and beyond elections, and we must therefore find their solutions beyond the ballot box. So with this backdrop, I want to talk to you about an emerging movement, the open government movement, that actually seeks to reinvigorate democracy between and beyond elections. The Open Government Partnership, or OGP, is one key platform for advancing this. So, you know, it was 2011 at the United Nations General Assembly where 8 heads of states and 9 civil society leaders came together to forge OGP, a new partnership to amplify citizen voice and oversight in governance. The spirit behind the partnership, which was echoed by one of the founders of OGP, former US President Barack Obama, is to ensure that government truly serves its citizens rather than itself. It is an idea at once simple and spectacular that citizens must have a say in decisions that impact their lives, but that this exercise of democracy must not be limited to the ballot box, but rather practiced every day by citizens shaping policies and services that impact their lives, because this work is too important and too big to be limited to only a few people or only once in 4 years when we cast our precious vote. So OGP empowers champions of citizen interests, most significantly reformers in government and civil society, to come together and co-create a 2-year action plan where reformers in government publicly commit to concrete actions to make government more open, participatory, responsive to citizens, while citizens and civil society engage to shape and oversee government between and beyond elections. And there is accountability from OGP's independent reporting mechanism, which publicly assesses, did the government open up as it promised it said it would do? In this way, OGP platform provided new tools for democracies to become more open and citizen-centric. So, in just over 7 years, 79 countries and a growing number of local governments, together representing more than 2 billion people, have joined OGP, along with thousands of civil society organizations. And I want to talk to you about their stories. Stories of committed reformers and activists who are advancing frontiers of open government, 4 frontiers through which citizens are being empowered to shape and oversee government between and beyond elections. So, first frontier, empowering citizens with information. So, I take you to northern Sri Lanka, where villagers had suffered tremendous devastation during the civil war of the 1980s, but they had not received any of the compensation announced by the government. But when the villagers heard about the right to information legislation, which had been launched through the OGP action plan, they started filing appeals. And as they started filing, the drama of accountability started unfolding and the compensation started flowing. So the very next day, the compensation got deposited in one person's bank account. The next day, this happened to 4 more people, and again, 27 times, till the villagers received the compensation that was due to them. You see, access to information gives citizens access to justice, to claim what is rightfully theirs. But open government is much more than opening up information. So the second frontier of open government is to empower citizens to participate, to shape policies and services that impact their lives. And this is particularly conducive and impactful to do at the local government level, where government is closest to the citizens. And several local governments have joined OGP recently. So I take you to Madrid, Spain, where there were 4 years of citizen protests. But when the protesters formed the government, they resolved that citizens should continue to be in charge beyond the ballot box. So they built Decide Madrid, which is an online and offline platform through which citizens can petition government on issues that matter to them, like more green parks, and the government responds. Using the OGP action plan, the government set aside 100 million euros for citizens to propose and vote on specific projects using the Decide Madrid platform, projects that respond to citizens' needs. With 400,000 registered users, Decide Madrid has grown almost as fast as Facebook in Madrid, and today is being emulated by 90 governments around the world, with Uruguay becoming the first OGP country to take this nationwide. I take you to Italy in 2014, where an investigative journalist found that only 9% of the EU funds were being utilized, including in the lagging regions of southern Italy. So in response, the government leveraged OGP to disclose on an online open coesione platform, and get this, details of 1 million projects, from large infrastructure grants to individual student grants, financed by 100 billion euros of EU funding. But you know what's fascinating is how they coupled this huge transparency with a massive public awareness building campaign to empower citizens, youth, and interestingly, high school students through school competitions to become on-the-ground citizen monitors of projects they cared about. So in Bovellina, for instance, high school students got engaged, and they managed to get a shelter which was barren and dysfunctional. They managed to get it properly equipped and reopened to serve refugees and migrants. I take you to Kaduna, Nigeria, where an audit just revealed that a health clinic promised to the citizens, paid by the budget, only existed on paper, a ghost clinic. In response, the director of budget, Muhammad Abdullahi, gave smartphones to his staff so they could monitor these projects. But you know, in a state of over 6 million people and only a handful of staff, this was never going to work. So he decided to partner with citizens to become the eyes and ears of government. Using a mobile app, citizens upload photos and feedback on projects. Does the road exist? The status of health clinic? And interestingly, this feedback goes directly to the governor's office and the state legislature to catalyze corrective action. In 2 years, Kaduna reports a record completion of 450 schools, 250 health clinics, and importantly, a 20% reduction in maternal mortality from mothers like Talatu here, who's from a remote settlement in Jaji, receiving prenatal care from completed health clinics. Now, in empowering citizens through mechanisms like this, the third frontier of open government is indeed to include those who have been historically excluded, so government truly serves all. A central priority here is to advance gender equality by empowering women through open government approaches. So in Buenos Aires, Argentina, women's groups and reformers created an online platform which is called Donde, which empowers young women with information on sexual and reproductive health services, which were very hard for them to access given prevailing cultural norms, enabling them to take decisions that impact their lives. OGP's new feminist open government initiative seeks to scale actions across the partnership to empower women politically, socially, economically. Politically, as in Sri Lanka, implementing a mandate to increase the representation of women in local elected office. Socially, as in Decide Madrid, prioritizing a shelter for women suffering gender-based violence. Economically, with Jalisco, Mexico, addressing the gender wage gap. But beyond advancing gender equality, an open government must also be open to the most marginalized and vulnerable. So I take you to Costa Rica, where the indigenous community had suffered from decades of exclusion and violence over the use of their homelands. But the OGP process empowered their network, which is called RIBCA, to join forces with a reformist vice minister. And they together institutionalized a consultation mechanism between government and the indigenous community, which built trust, abated conflict, and ushered vital investments in health and education. Germany is leveraging OGP to incentivize and foster the integration of migrants and refugees in local communities. So beyond fostering inclusion through mechanisms like this, the fourth and final frontier of open government is to empower citizens to monitor grand corruption and elite capture. So for this, I take you to Ukraine in the aftermath of the Maidan Revolution, where young reformers and activists came together and vowed to tackle the capture of public procurement, including by oligarchs. So they created, and it's fascinating, they created two platforms, ProZorro and DoZorro, leveraging OGP, through which all contracts, which were previously shrouded in secrecy and handed out in corrupt backroom deals, got disclosed in open data standards so citizens could search them, and very innovatively, citizens could report violations. So dramatic results. In 2 years, citizens reported 14,000 violations, of which half have been publicly resolved. The government reports saving $1 billion. 82% of the private sector surveyed reported reduced corruption from the use of this platform. And there's been a 50% increase in companies, including small and medium enterprises, bidding for public contracts for the first time because they trust the system. Galvanized by these results, 46 OGP governments have embraced open contracting. Post-Panama Papers, which unmasked rampant money laundering, tax evasion, and stashing of stolen assets in anonymous companies, 16 OGP countries, such as UK and Slovakia, are now opening up who really owns the companies, allowing journalists and citizen activists to follow the money, report illicit funds, and hold the powerful accountable for paying taxes just as other citizens do. We now need more OGP countries, including the US and Canada, to commit similarly to ending anonymous companies. So I have taken you through a tour around the world across 4 frontiers of open government. And what emerges across these frontiers, across these stories, is one central spine. It's a picture of societies where citizens are engaged, shaping and overseeing more open governments every day, not just once in 4 years when they cast their vote, where citizen voice and oversight is complementing and augmenting the traditional role of bureaucracy, legislature, oversight institutions, where participatory democracy augments and enhances representative democracy. But a cross-cutting foundation for all of this is civic space. Citizens' basic ability to freely speak, associate, assemble, and engage across these frontiers of government. But this foundation itself is under attack today in over 100 countries. We are witnessing an unprecedented rise in authoritarian leaders who are adopting a widely spreading playbook of eroding checks and balances, attacking civil society, attacking journalists who face harassment, violence, and, as we have also sadly seen, death. Unfortunately, we see similar problems in OGP as well. OGP countries instead have a responsibility to role model the opposite, as seen most beautifully in South Korea's candlelight revolution. So I take you next to Seoul, where millions of citizens descended upon Gwanghwamun Square in Seoul in candlelight protests for 5 months to bring down the corrupt regime of President Park. But the interesting thing is the story didn't end there. The new Moon government wanted to leverage the same civic energy, so it invited citizens back into Gwanghwamun Square to freely associate, assemble, and propose proposals that respond to their needs. It resulted in 181,000 policy proposals in 49 days, of which 2,000 have already been incorporated into policy. You know, we need more Gwanghwamun Squares in our world today. And if civic space is a cross-cutting foundation, digital technology is a cross-cutting accelerator of innovations across frontiers of open government. From Decide Madrid to Ukraine's Prozoro, we have seen how technology is offering unprecedented opportunities for government to open information to citizens, for citizens to directly engage, provide feedback, and oversight. But it is also true that we are seeing the misuse of new technologies. For instance, the spread of disinformation and threats to our individual privacy. Even here, OGP countries can start by setting new norms to tackle these. For instance, by regulating online political ads, by protecting civic rights on how information about us is collected and used, as Australia is doing through OGP, or as in Canada and France, promoting greater transparency in public algorithms, which are today impacting all our lives. So I've shared with you how open government approaches are tackling long-standing challenges as well as new threats to democracy. But you know, the reality is also that these are too few and far between, these reforms. While some OGP countries are implementing transformative reforms, many others are not. We need to scale up these innovations so they become the new global norms. We need to transform this young and nascent open government partnership into a vibrant global force for reinvigorating democracy and serving as a countervailing force to the rise of authoritarianism today. This is a formidable task against very powerful headwinds that we see in our world today. So how do we forge stronger coalitions to push forward? At the global level, at a time when traditional champions of democracy have retreated and unfortunately regressed, we need new world leaders such as Argentina, Canada, France, Germany, South Korea, who now lead OGP to forge stronger coalitions to collectively push back. At a time when leaders like Hungary's Viktor Orban proudly proclaim the end of liberal democracy, we need more heads of states, ministers, mayors to speak out in democracy's defense, to showcase the dividends from this reinvigoration of democracy, and to challenge head-on the claims of strongmen that democracy is an impediment and dictatorship expedient in delivering results for citizens. At the country level, we need to broaden awareness, ownership, and coalitions for open government across ministries, parliaments, judiciary, private sector, and a broader constellation of civil society to include women's rights organizations, LGBTQ activists, advocates for health and education. Above all, we need citizens in all walks of life, especially youth, all of you, to join the movement. If you're a concerned citizen, engage, including through the OGP process in your country. Demand open budgets, open contracts. Ask to become the eyes and ears of public services. Ensure your voice is heard between elections, not just once in 4 years. If you're a reformer in government, open government to citizens. but above all, join hands with others, because you cannot win this battle alone. You see, I experienced this in a very personal way, growing up in Bihar, which was India's poorest and most corrupt state. You see, my father was responsible for building roads in the Bihar government. So he fought against corruption in the award of road contracts. But he was a lonely warrior against a powerful political machinery. So he was harassed, intimidated, and threatened. But he persisted, including later in life as a civil society activist. At age 80, though he was no lawyer, he fought a public interest litigation in court himself. He won the ruling, but later that very day, he fell and he died. He fought till the very end, the two bookends of his life, from government reformer to civil society, mirroring and straddling the two communities of OGP, but his was a lonely battle. That was the year before OGP was born. Now, 7 years on since OGP, a young and reformist Minister for Public Works in Afghanistan, Yama Yari, decided to fight the mafia capture of road contracts, exactly as my father was trying to fight it in Bihar years earlier. You see, Yama felt passionately that corruption was robbing precious resources that could be used to deliver on the aspirations of those Afghans, such as those who had braved the bombs to cast their vote. But unlike my father's lonely journey, Yama was able to leverage OGP to forge partnerships to bolster him. Domestically, he joined forces with courageous civil society leaders such as Syed Afzali and Nasser Timuri of Integrity Watch. Together, they mobilized citizens to monitor road contracts and report violations, saving $500 million in 4.5 years. Internationally, the OGP platform helped shine a global spotlight on their efforts and connected them to reformers fighting similar battles elsewhere. Tragically, last year, Yama's office was bombed, killing 29 of his team and wounding 28. But Yama has continued his fight undeterred, bolstered by his courage, conviction, and coalitions. You see, bombs could not deter citizens from casting their vote, and bombs could not deter reformers from persisting to deliver on the promise of that vote. It is this spirit of reformers and activists fighting against formidable odds to open government to citizens, of citizens persisting to have their voice on decisions that impact them. It is this spirit, this collective energy that powers OGP. So our challenge is, are we, each one of us, simply disconnected, lonely warriors like my father, fighting individual battles? And how can we be a joined up force, multiplying collective strength to prevail over those powerful predators that capture the state to serve their interests rather than the citizens? Now you may say, this is an impossible task. But let me share with you an example from nature in closing, which helps make the impossible possible. So this is a phenomenon of starlings. Starlings are these small birds that are vulnerable to prey from the falcon. The falcon is the predator that can swoop down from the sky and swallow them up. But at dusk time, hundreds and thousands of starlings make a formation in the sky that is known as murmurations for the sound they produce. And these murmurations have a function. The function is to ward off the falcon. and lo and behold, you see the awesome power of the collective. You see, individual citizens are like starlings, like the Afghans. They cast their vote, but beyond the ballot box, they feel helpless and hopeless in the face of the grand falcons of corruption, exclusion, authoritarianism. But we have seen in South Korea citizen murmurations descend upon Gwanghwamun Square to bring down the very president. We have seen in Afghanistan reformers and civil society join forces to fight the mafia, to deliver on the aspirations of the citizens. As traditional champions of democracy have retreated, the falcon of authoritarianism has gained strength. With 100 national and local governments, thousands of civil society organizations, OGP provides a platform to forge ever more powerful murmurations, locally, nationally, globally, to reinvigorate democracy between and beyond elections, to forge a countervailing force against the rise of authoritarianism, to serve as a bulwark, a bastion, a beacon for those lonely warriors, to empower ordinary people to shape and oversee their government, to ensure it serves them rather than itself, to deliver on that precious, precious promise, a government which is for the people, of the people, by the people. Thank you.